Hi, yes, my name's Wayne from parentingwithempathy.co.uk, and I'd like to talk today about food, the therapeutic aspects about it, the practical aspects, all the theoretical bits and pieces behind it as well. There's an awful lot to food that we need to consider for our own children and for our foster carer child and for those in residential children's homes as well. I've been a foster carer from 1986 through to 2014 and then opened 3 children's homes between 2014 and 2023. So I've got quite a bit of experience there of living with, caring for, working with young people. To see the issues around food, and there are a lot, and there's a lot to be considered. What I want to do is talk about those aspects. Now, some of those are going to be specific to my experience as a foster carer or when I was working in the residential children's homes, but that doesn't mean that they aren't relevant for the usual family house with children or young people struggling with their food. So I'm hoping there's lessons and tips and bits and pieces to learn in here for everyone. I'm going to be using a document produced by John Whitwell quite a few years ago now, along with my own thoughts and observations alongside of that. John's very experienced in childcare field. I think he qualified back in 1969. He's got his own website, johnwhitwell.co.uk. It's a nice site, a personal site of professional interest. And yeah, I would ask you to explore this. I think it's a really good resource. He's got the papers that he's written, there's archives there, there's different scrapbooks and bits and pieces. An interview with John Diamond, he's one of the leading people in therapeutic care at the moment as well. So lots of good things on this website. I'm going to concentrate on one of the papers that he's written from here, like I say, with regards to food. In care, when a young person arrives in a new foster home or a new residential home, that's something that really needs to be looked at of their eating patterns. You don't have to do it, notebook and pen or whatever, but keep an eye on them to check out their eating patterns. Are they being greedy? Are they one of the squirrels where they sort of store it and take away and hide it away? Are there some of those children that take a bite out of everything and not actually enjoy it or get any satisfaction from the food? And I would also say there's a need as well, to keep an eye on those who maybe go to the toilet straight after a meal. We've seen that where they're trying to bring up the food that they've just eaten. So things like that are needed to be checked on, to be curious about later on maybe with them. John Whitwell mentions about the idea that what we're doing is looking after people where the early primary needs haven't been met, where their feeding experience has not been a satisfactory experience beforehand, obviously particularly in the world of care. And that's a big thing. It's a very early impression and a very early interaction with people. So we need to be mindful of that and think of the importance of food as a therapeutic tool in our home to help young people recover from hiccups that have been in the past, particularly with that early primary needs not being met. The availability and supply of food has a deep meaning as well. You get often young people who struggle where there's not enough of everything to go around, or that's their belief, or they're looking out for who's got the most on the plate because that's unfair. All that type of anxiety around food for young people. It's an essence basically of lack of trust of the adults and the carers around them. They have to look out for themselves and they do it on the most basic level. Now, Bruno Bettelheim, one of the guys that's actually mentioned or is a reference to him on the John Whitwell website, He says, I'm going to quote on this, food represents one of the child's earliest contacts with the external world, which we can appreciate that, yeah? It is the activity around which personal relationships first develop and around which they may first break down, with the most dangerous consequences. So yes, I mean, a baby in the arms of the carer, that's an important relationship, that being fed, timely, on time, it's a chance to bond with the baby, isn't it, of the making of the eye contact and all of that sort of thing. But again, it comes down to our children. It's not necessarily what's happened to them that causes them as they are. Quite often it's what's not happened to them, and this could be one of those aspects, really. So they've had really few reliable and good feeding experiences, maybe. Now, meal times have to be managed. The practical aspects of meal times here come into this. In a children's home, we've got a 3-week menu planner, which is required by Ofsted, which was a little surprising because they're always saying about not wanting homes to be institutionalised. Well, there's not many places where you've got planned what you're going to eat next Tuesday or whatever. But I think it does work for our children. This having this planner where, first of all, they can discuss if they don't like lasagna that's due to be cooked in 2 days' time. And they've gone off the idea of lasagna, or one of them has. So it is a possibility in a community meeting to change that meal, and again, that's something that maybe you could have in fostering or with your own children, just a little talk about meals and who likes what or whatever. So it is possible to change this planned menu, but it has to be done with the agreement of all young people concerned, and obviously the carers as well. And then it's about the structure around the food itself as well, that there is definitely a positive around the young person knowing what time they will have their food and having a structure to that. It's a bit like our young people in the children's homes like to know who's on shift the next day as they're going to bed. Quite a lot of them need that information to calm their anxieties, to prepare themselves maybe. They don't like shocks. So I think there's a bit of that knowledge of needing to know type of thing that kicks in with our young people. We have also then the practical aspect of, well, what happens if a young person isn't hungry or doesn't like what's being cooked? What do you do there? And I must admit, on that practical side, we've always been of the view that, well, okay, you can eat part of the food, or you can maybe make a sandwich out of the food, or maybe we could prepare just a very basic sandwich of things that are in the fridge, ham sandwich, cheese sandwich or whatever, as an alternative. Because obviously we want the young people to eat. But I think we would definitely have that boundary that, no, we're not going to prepare you another meal instead. The meal is on the table. If you wish to ignore it, fair enough. We will go somewhere to helping you out, but we're not going to bother to cook a whole different meal instead. And we've tried to keep to that boundary over the years. I think it helps. Now also you get a situation of some young people who like to cook for themselves. And I would say that this is down to basically lack of trust with the carers around them. It can cause all sorts of hassles because generally the young people who don't trust the adults around them are therefore chaotic in nature, possibly disorganised attachment, if you know your attachment style. And I've seen many of these young people cooking and the frying pans been spitting and they're going to burn the pans, and you have all these other concerns when really they're quite adamant that no, whatever you cook they're not going to trust and like, and you can't take that personal because that's just survival instinct of where they are and what's happened to them, what they've been through. But it is tricky to manage the process of seeing them or allowing them to cook their own dinners as well. As it happens, actually, most of those young people who do the cooking themselves tend to like bacon. And I think bacon's there because it's quite simple to cook. and quite tasty, so quite rewarding that they've done it themselves. So that seems to be a big one with the young people, of cooking for themselves and liking bacon, showing a lack of trust in the carers around them. And yes, that eating one thing is a regular thing as well, we've seen. So all of that, where they are insistent on cooking for themselves, have a very narrow range of food that they eat, is a clue to the direction of care that you need to go with them. The behaviours are symbolic, shows a lack of care, and maybe there's some need to do some maybe trust exercises with them. And I'm sure that we will be putting some videos on in a different section of Parenting with Empathy, of some exercises that you can do to work on trust with young people, because that's a very important part of the work, but it's not as if it happens overnight. John Whitwell talks about a young person who was sick and had some revulsion when sitting down to the table in his children's home, and there was obviously concern about that young person, but actually in the process of observing them, they'd noticed that the young person was actually sitting in while the food was being made, and they'd have a little nibble here and there, and he took that as tasting and testing of the food, while not really being prepared to be seen as trusting or accepting of the adults around them. That's a possible. Not keen, but actually building up the strength and the courage to trust the adults around them to actually eat the meal. Then we have the young people who eat and eat and eat, and they're quite concerning. How on earth can this child eat this much? And really, all of the therapeutic aspects look at this as some sort of emotional emptiness of the young person. So it's not necessarily feeding their bellies, but they're feeding their emotional emptiness as well. It's an instead of, it's a substitute as well, or whatever. And John Whitwell talks about this and says that he always believed that food should never be withheld from a young person in such circumstances, because you need to correct that feeling within them to then be able to move on together, and then in time you can cut down on the menus and the amount of food that they're eating, basically. But it does cause problems if you're living in a children's home, or you've got foster kids, or you've got a large family, whatever, other young people around. Because one young person eating and seemingly wanting everything can cause issues with other young people who suddenly start thinking, will there be enough for me here? So that's a problem. And also you've then got the issues with the carers of your parents, where they've got to consider the health and the weight of this young person, because obviously they're going to be putting on weight eating all of that food. Generally probably tend not to be the most physical of the people, of the young people of the home, or those wanting to play and do exercise or whatever as well. So that causes an additional increase in weight. And then on top of that, you've also got the idea of cortisol, which is a chemical created within us all at times of high anxiety. And it's a natural one. It's like when we cross the road and we see a car coming at us quickly, the body releases chemicals so we can get out the way of that car, and we would probably move a bit quicker than we usually could do or would want to, and think quicker, and all of this process kicks in to save our lives. So it's one of those. It's that type of chemical. So cortisol, though, has the effect of putting a band of fat around our mid-range in preparation, knowing that there's things not quite right because of the high levels of cortisol. So the body's under some stress, so hey, let's store a bit of fat away in case it's needed at some other time. So that sort of kicks in as well with our young people who are chaotic, in fight and flight, untrusting of carers, creates that high anxiety level. The cortisol then creates that extra bandwidth as well as the fact of them wanting to eat and eat and eat. So that's a problem. But that's more the hyper response, And with any behaviours you get hyper and hypo, and hypo is the lack of response, the under response rather than the over response. And the under response, I would say, is those young people who don't eat, or struggle to eat, or only eat one thing. And they can be a challenge. You know, many young people who only eat bacon or only eat sausages, probably a lot more who only eat McDonald's. And that's a concern, because, you know, what's the rest of the vitamins and chemicals and things, where are they in the body? But, you know, if we look at what they're eating as why they're eating only that type of food, we can say that it's down to that lack of trust in the situation that they're in and that high anxiety levels. So, you know, the fact that they're only eating bacon, sausage, McDonald's, hopefully is only that interim period before they get used to the carer, the home, and start having an attachment. Yeah, I think the worries what we've had in the past when we've been foster carers and working in children's homes like that, is what will Ofsted say? What will our foster managers say when, you know, we're only giving them McDonald's to eat? I don't think there's a problem in doing that as long as it's on a short-term basis as you're building up to something else. You know, the kids need to eat. You can't force them to eat anything else. If that's all they'll eat, well, just give it to them and let's keep going until one day they can trust us and have that relationship in us, which is what attachment's all about, to be able to broaden their horizons and eat something else. In essence, they need to experience and internalise a caring adult and feel safe, and that's what the attachment process is about. But we know the attachment process doesn't kick instantly. So, eating together. Lots of practical aspects here. Carers and young people, yes, they should eat together if possible. And really around a table, I would say, rather than TV dinners, watching the TV. We've had young people who, you know, I'd rather not eat with the group. Okay, all right, that's fine. Have a carer sit with them while they're eating, have a little chat or whatever. But that's fine. We're working on eventually them coming to the table and sitting with everybody else. An interim step might be they eat separately and then they join the others at the dinner table without actually eating themselves, just to get used to that group situation, that group feel. But, you know, with the eventual aim that everybody's sitting there and eating together. The practical aspects here are that you have to be aware of the seating plan for where the young people sit. It is a great time for young people who want to wind up other young people by kicking under the table or saying unnecessary things or being cruel while they're eating the meals, because they've got a captive audience there. I'll talk about that in a second. But yes, so you've got to be careful where they sit. You know, they're not be able to kick under the table. I would also say, in attachment terms, you've got, you know, where the young people who are avoidant and ambivalent sit could be of importance. My personal experiences, I found that avoidant people feel safer and better and more open in joining into the meeting when they're sitting alongside a carer rather than opposite a carer. For me, the ambivalent young person loves sitting opposite a carer at a meal and having that eye contact as you're eating the meals and having a chat or whatever. Avoidants prefer to be at the side and not such a focus of attention. But yes, there is a need to distract the young people when they're eating. And that can be through discussion and conversation, but like I say, it can also lead to the one bad apple winding everybody else up. Certainly when we were fostering, we had that young person who would spread discord during the meal time, and we thought, well, what can we do here? We didn't want to bring in a TV that everybody watched in silence while they ate. So what we did, set up a photo frame at the end of the table and we got the habit of taking lots and lots of pictures and keeping that digital photo frame. It was digital, lots of pictures flashing up every 5 seconds or whatever it was, of keeping that up to date. And boy, did that turn the conversations to a positive. Kids laughing about situations that they'd remembered, shared histories together and things like that. And it also had the added benefit that they all wanted or were more amenable to having photographs taken, because they knew that they were going to be displayed at lunch or mealtime for everybody to watch. So that served very well for us, and might be a suggestion for yourselves. John Whitwell likes the idea of having identifiable food that can be chosen from pots on the table. And he says it's not helpful to present food which could be seen to disguise or hide anything dreadful or poisonous. So mixtures, for instance, or piles of food can cause insecurities and worries in the anxieties in the young people. So yes, he liked the idea of individual pots, even personalised pots and plates, which I think really appeals to their emotional age. We know that most young people who've been through trauma or struggling of these behavioural issues tend to have a lower emotional age, so they're younger than actually their physical presence. John was also against cutting up things. He thought that masked to a young person, it could be read anyway, as there not being enough, so you're cutting it up to go further, or could even unfairly share out food if you were cutting it up. So presumably, if we're giving sausages, you'd give 3 sausages each rather than cut them up into little bits, and then people might be wondering if he's got half a sausage more than me, type of thing. That's my reading of that one. And also I've seen this as well myself, is that John recommends the cooking of individual smaller cakes, for instance, to a larger whole cake where it's then cut by a carer, and the carer can make mistakes and give 2 millimeters less to one young person than they can to another, and that isn't fair, is it? So at least if they've got their own individual small cake, that resolves that problem. Yeah. But I think the aim is to have meals as a great socialising event, where the young people are comfortable with each other. They've gained the security knowing that there is going to be enough food for them, that it is safe for them to eat, there's no poisons hidden in there at all, and it's tasty and nutritious, and they've learned about the benefits of food and things like that. So yes, mealtime's a great socialising event. In between meals can be a problem. In John's case, John Whitwell recommends the use of what he called a spares tin, which was basically a tin where the young people could go to when they wanted something, and whatever's in there, I don't know, maybe a piece of fruit or a chocolate bar or some sort of fruit bars that you get these days, were available to the young person. John said that he liked the idea that these could be available any time, even 2 to 3 minutes before a meal. He wasn't against that, because the problem we've got is that with our young people being emotionally challenged and struggling to control their emotions, the cooking of food and the smells generally lead to the need for instant gratification from our young people, and that can often end up in a battle in many foster care and children's homes, and your ordinary family homes. Sure, that can end up in a battle at times, because there's the smells of the cooking making the young person feel hungry, and why would I have to wait 2 or 3 more minutes before the dinner's ready when I can go to the fridge and have something now. So that's where John was saying, well, okay, yeah, avoid that hassle. Yes, if you want it, yes, go and get it. Get something small just to keep you going till mealtime. Now, in the children's home, we had the very similar. We had a picnic box, and that was the same sort of thing, little snacks and bits and pieces available for the young people if they wanted. We did put a limit on it. I think it was about 2 to 3 items per day and 1 item at a time. But that used to help as a little top up for the young people during the day. Yeah, John Whitwell talks about the need for a relationship between the young people based on the provision of food and the feeling of safety, knowing that food has been provided for them, which allows the focus for trust and dependency on the carer, sees that as the beginning of their needs being met for the first time. So quite a significant step there in the lives of the young people. If you can calm them, get them to accept the food that you're giving and eat it. So food can help to heal the wound left by the first and probably the most incomplete experience of these young persons' lives. And the idea is that really they need to experience it as freely given before they can begin to enter into a normal relationship. When I was in charge of the online shop for the children's home, and when we were foster carers to some instance as well, we never really used to buy cakes or biscuits. Not because we were penny pinching or anything like that, or for the health matters of it, to be honest. We preferred to buy the ingredients to then make the items with the young person as an attachment exercise. So we weren't saying you couldn't have cake and biscuits, but hey, come on, let's make it ourselves. Tastes yummy, and it's a good exercise to work with the young people. So I would urge something like that if you're struggling with getting to know the young people. And on top of that, you've also got the use of English, where they have to read the menus and follow instructions or whatever. You've got possibly a bit of maths there where they're measuring things out and you might be, rounding up and rounding down or whatever. You've got the sensory benefits of the smells in the home, which we mentioned about before, which can cause problems. But maybe that's the beginning of this delayed gratification where they realise that, yes, just because the cookies smell as if they're done, actually, I do have to wait a couple of more minutes. So there's that level of basic learning for them as well, I think, that comes into it. As well as it being a distraction for them from their usual flashbacks and, what's normally on their mind. They can focus in with you on the cooking and the preparation of your cakes and your biscuits. It's a great calming therapeutic process. Now we also used food as part of settling. And settling is, in effect, bedtime. But we did find quite often that our young people didn't like the idea of it being called bedtime, particularly the older ones, particularly when some of their mates might still be out ravaging the streets at that time of night. So we called it settling, that you can go to your rooms and you watch your TV and you just settle and you get ready for when you want to go to sleep. And we used to provide what we called a little picnic as part of this, a little plate of nibbles, fruit, bit of cake, bit of whatever, bit of few nuts and bits and pieces, just for them to nibble on while they're in the bed, sorted with their pyjamas on or whatever, maybe watching a bit of telly, listening to a bit of music before they go to bed. We found that was part of the settling process, because the settling process has to be a physical, psychological process of winding down, of a routine of this is what we do at 9 o'clock, this is what we do at past, this is what we do at 9:45, and we know it's lights out at 10, that type of thing. So gaining the young people to buy into that routine and gaining comfort from it. So part of that was, yes, the little picnic. And also it allowed us to slip in a little bit of extra nurturing before they fell asleep. Because our avoidant young people who have that rejection to care, an allergy of care, who when they're being mumsied have that sort of curled lip that, not keen on that sort of idea. One of the ways for us to break down their rejection of us as people and as carers is to do that enforced nurture of provision of food, even when they've not asked for it, even when it's not requested, but just to show that we do think about you, we hold you in mind. And it's just chipping away at that wall that they have of around them of rejection of other people, where we're showing our worth to them and chipping away and getting them used to significant adults around them. I think that's a good and big part of what it is. So that little picnic on the night helps with an extra bit of nurture, enforced nurture there. And we even used to leave a jug of juice out into the bedroom hallway as well, in case anybody got thirsty in the middle of the night. And that used to help the process and the settling process as well. John Whitwell tells us that there is evidence to show that food plays an important part in the treatment of an emotionally deprived child who has turned to delinquency as the main source of excitement in his life. The theory is that delinquent excitement is frequently displaced from frustrated infantile greed. So he gives the example of a baby wanting food and feeling hungry, and there's that build-up of excitement of, ooh, lovely food coming or whatever, bottle coming or whatever, and then Karen not turning up, and then much later arriving with the food, child still hungry, but that excitement has been displaced. It's not matched and been resolved by the food. And I think the idea is that this excitement seems to have been displaced off into delinquent behaviour, and the problem, or the work to be done there, is to replace and get that excitement back to alongside the element of an aspect of food. There certainly seems to be shades of John Bowlby's 44 Juvenile Thieves there. I don't know if you're aware of John Bowlby, the founder of attachment theory. He did some work into 44 juveniles who lost their mothers, suffering from maternal loss, and they went down the avenue of delinquency. So maybe there's a bit about the aspect of food that came into that as well. And also on that lack of food being provided for the young person at that time. That's another example of neglect. And we know that neglect leads to avoidant young people, and avoidant young people who have no regard for people around them because they don't see anything special from them, no appreciation of a significant adult in their life. So that type of background leads to the avoidant child, who then needs, as I mentioned earlier in the previous section, about the enforced nurture, to get them used to a significant person who can provide for their needs when they think that they can just do it themselves. Quite often the ones that do the cooking for themselves are either disorganised, lack of fear, or that highly avoidant, severely avoidant. There's also the essence of food creating hunger, or being hangry, where a young person is hungry but with their emotional problems not being able to identify emotional feelings, they become angry because they're hungry. I've seen that with tiredness as well, become angry when they're tired rather than realising that they need to have a little nap or go to bed on time tonight, that type of thing. But I've also seen food turning into plain silliness, and my example of that is we had a young 13, 14-year-old teenage girl used to come back from school 3:30. We used to say, well, go out and play with your friends and we'll prepare the meal and we'll have it ready for 4:30. And it was just a routine that we got into. But then we found that she was then struggling with behaviours. She'd strip off in front of a group of lads and start parading around naked. She'd walk around when she found a dead pigeon and walk around with that on her head and be silly. I think she found a dog poo and put it on her lip like a moustache. Lots of silliness in that hour in between the meal. So when we asked her, why are you doing this, there wasn't any explanation, and so we decided, okay, let's cut it down to food. So we made her meal at 3:30 when she came in, and lo and behold, the behaviour stopped immediately. It worked. So we kept that going. Problem was, later on that year we went on a holiday and we were on the beach enjoying the surfing and the bodyboards and building sandcastles and all that lot with all the other kids that we were with. And then suddenly in the afternoon she gets this bodyboard that she's been playing with in most of the morning, gets on it and starts swimming out to sea. And it's like, where's she going? And by the time we realised she was going further than we wanted, it was too far to go and fetch her. In the end, she ended up being on this like speck in the distance, and everybody's on the beach like, what's happening there? What's happening there? The lifeguard had to dash in. He got on this jet ski and he went out to collect our young person, who came back to the beach with everybody looking and laughing and noticing what had happened, and she was fuming, livid with the embarrassment of it all. But when we said, what happened, what was all that about, there was no explanation, none at all. And then we looked at our watches and it was 4:30 and we hadn't eaten. And it was, oh yes, we need to keep to this structure, this pattern of food deliverance and eating of food rigidly at all times. Another silliness that she did. So, in conclusion, I hope there's been some points here that might have been some use to you practically, whether you're a parent or foster parent or a residential care worker. Please check out that website of John Whitwell, because he knows his stuff. Good bloke, comes from a good place, the information there. And also check out our site. Yeah, we've got lots of videos. We've got more videos coming. If you like what you see, please click and subscribe. Please click that like button. And yes, hope to see you soon. Thank you. Bye.